So that 2.7 refers to if you go to page 28, you'll see 2.7 being the variance in March for the year.
Yeah.
So what that note means that there's a significant amount of work going into understanding exactly why at 2.7, and so this is the reconciliation between different groups.
Right, okay. To work out, well, we approved a budget for...
It would take into account...
What's not right here?
It would, Correct. It would take into account savings through the restructure as well as other type of...
and unfilled positions, we may not be spending the money.
Vacancies, holidays that came in that third quarter that...
Right.
Sorry, for instance, January through March.
Okay.
So that 2.7. Interesting though that the March salaries was being on budget. So
there could be an error, I suppose, or
there won't be an error. It's just about clarifying exactly where that savings come from in terms of what is a one-off and what is going forward.
All right, that's fine. Okay, swaps. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Any further questions on the monitoring report? Councillor King.
On page 64, under river plan, can someone explain that to me?
That's the question that Councillor Mallett raised.
So I take it the money, it wasn't there where we thought it would come from, the surplus?
It wasn't there as I read it, and I wasn't here at that time, but it was to be approved during the long-term plan process, but we had to find the money. And so the support services review was a vehicle for us to go and find that money.
And then going up to the Coro Street wing, does that mean it costs $250,000 to relocate staff out of there, but we're hoping to get $62,000 back in rental? Is that, am I interpreting that properly?
That's correct.
But then it's unlikely that we'll be able to rent it at the end. I'm just trying to work out the rationale of why we would do that.
The space in the council, there's an enormous amount of space under utilisation, so we've taken people out of the Carrow building so we could generate some income from that space.
And fill up the main building?
Correct.
Okay. And on page 28, under loss and swaps, everyone's saying this is just a book entry. I mean, to me, this is a real $15 million loss. I'm just trying to work out why we seem to be quite offhand about it, throwing it off as a book entry only. When I lose money on a swap, I lose money, I've got to pay out. Why? How's council different? I mean, sure, I might have a contract over several years and it all wraps up at the end, but when it moves against you, it's a real loss. It's not just a book entry.
It'll never be realised because the swaps are entered into as part of our 10-year process, 10-year plan process, so that we can have certainty around our cost of debt. So it's really a position around cash flow and ensuring that we have certainty around cash flow. And we do have a known debt position as a financial strategy outlines. So they are book entries. They get revalued every month in terms of what the current value of that swap is, as opposed to how we took out that swap. If we think about a fixed mortgage, it's the same deal. If mortgage rates drop and we're fixed in at a higher level, we have we incur that extra expense. But what it does give us is certainty, and so the swaps themselves are an instrument for us to create that certainty for council's finances.
I don't understand how we take a swap to protect ourselves, but it never gets realised.
It would be realised if we took no more swaps tomorrow and we cancelled all the swaps, then it would be realised. But that's not the position of council or the position of any council in New Zealand. They are ongoing. So they are book entries that are revalued every month, the difference, but it never gets realised. It's a non-cash entry. One of the things that we're wanting to do to support the understanding of swaps is to have Stuart Henderson from PwC do that, have that discussion where it gives you an opportunity to ask some questions. It's at the 17th of May briefing. And I think in that session, he'll be able to explain a number of things that he does proactively to advise council in terms of being in a very good position around swaps. I can say that in terms of conversations I've had with Stuart, there is no council in New Zealand, or in fact any SOE or large corporation that isn't experiencing the same type of book entries at the moment, as the interest rates we know have dropped significantly over recent time.
I'm looking forward to the briefing because I struggle to see how they aren't real losses in the end. And once it runs its course, I struggle to see how it's not a real loss.
Yeah, and I suppose the key point there is that
And how there isn't somebody on the other side collecting.
it doesn't end, is what I'm saying, and that's
Yeah,
why.
I know it doesn't end.
Yeah.
But there are still losses that are made. That's what the whole thing's about. And it's either profit or loss, and I just don't understand how we're throwing it off as a book entry and actually we never have to pay. And that's not correct. And I'm looking forward to the briefing to hear how we can be involved in this market without any real losses
Sure.
or profits. I do understand it has a long-term cycle, but I struggle to see that the losses aren't real, they're only a book entry.
Any further questions,
I'm happy
councillor
to
King?
move. I'm happy to move.
Okay.
You ready?
Okay. Deputy Mayor Chesterman, you're happy to second? Is there any debate on the recommendation from management that the report be received? There is none. Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Next item is the key projects monitoring report, and that's on page 71.
Thank you, Chair. I'll present that report. It's a regular report, monitoring report. I take it as read. The only item that's changed since the last report Chris has spoken to in terms of the Hamilton Ring Road, in terms of its risk. But so that is one of the 5 areas that we judge, which is about the time frame. But most of these projects, as you see, are in green. So happy to take questions.
I'm happy to move the report.
Councillor Gallagher, do you have a question?
Oh, just the amber light, sorry.
That's the ring road.
You're happy to
Okay,
Chris-
sorry.
second? Okay, I've just got one question. Is it possible, and it's perhaps aimed towards Chris, in paragraph 12, second dot, that a report will come to the 7th of June strategy meeting? Is it possible that we can get some indication as to what the additional cost might be to the next finance meeting, which is in May? Or is
Come in May. Why can't?
Yeah, look, I think we can do that.
I mean, given that we're getting to the end of our financial year,
Yep.
it would be helpful to be a little more certain around if there is a substantial increase in the cost.
Yeah, we're certainly looking to do that in some sort of briefing format as well. So
Okay,
certainly, I think that's achievable. Yes.
okay. So could we put that on the action list, that if it's possible, we can get some update in terms of cost and time impacts? And our next meeting, I think, is the 19th, isn't it? 19th of May. Yep. Okay, thank you. All right, Your Worship, you've moved, Deputy Mayor Chesterman has seconded. Is there any discussion on the key projects monitoring report? There being none, those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Item number 12 on page 86 is the contract for the supply of library collection material. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm happy to move. I'm happy to move it.
Happy to move? Okay. Seconder, any discussion?
Is there anything our professionals from the library would want to add to this report?
It's all fairly clear, the process you've been through?
That's
Yep.
correct.
And Wheelers are the ones that you have talked about constantly as being the leading providers.
Correct, yes, and we have had a relationship with them for the last 6 years through a
Yes.
contract.
So you're not changing contractors at all? No? Okay. Okay, well, we have no discussion. Put that to the vote. It's a recommendation from management, items A on paragraph 8, items A through to E. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Claudelands Event Centre on page 89. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to apologise for the error that we made in having the wrong quarterly report attachment put into the earlier papers, and you should have this new, slightly more sanitised version. We had tried to jazz our report up a little bit, but it's still really not in good enough shape, and we've also found some errors in it as well while it was in the system. Perhaps, Mr. Chair, if I could just make a couple of introductory remarks, and obviously I listened in on the conversation when you were going through the minutes for the last Finance Committee report, and I think happy to defer to democracy to check the wording in terms of what was reported in the minutes with regards to Claudelands' performance. However, I will say that my recollection of how it should be worded is that I did say that as at the end of the second quarter, our revenue was on par with the previous year's revenue track. So certainly below budget and uncomfortably below budget, but I did say that it was on par with our actual revenue levels for the prior year. So the quarterly report that's in front of you, the main news quite obviously is that we have not been able to arrest the shortfall in revenue for the business. We had a very, very bad first quarter. We didn't have the sort of business that we'd had in previous years or the previous year with the likes of some of the large impact shows, particularly exhibitions and large performances. We have been successful, however, in generally offsetting our shortfall in revenue by savings in expenditure. It's been a little bit hard, but we've done it, and we expect to be able to continue to support that towards the end of the financial year. The team, myself, we have been working extremely hard on our revenue challenge. Please, I must stress upon you that we are very, very aware of it, and we have been taking it quite seriously. Without wanting to appear to be making excuses, we are, however, very challenged in a challenging market. We have got great gains moving forward with our, and also in this year's results with our conferencing business, our meetings and functions and events businesses. But as I've said to you earlier, the loss of a couple of major exhibition type events and a couple of larger performance activities has taken its toll this year. Having said that, our forward book is looking good. Our fourth quarter for the current financial year will be on budget, but it is going to be a very, very busy quarter for the team, right across the board with a few big shows, and similarly the first quarter for next financial year is looking very strong against our current plan. So we are taking a little bit of heart on that. So happy to take any questions if I may.
Thank you. Questions of the General Manager? All right, I'm happy to move that the report be received. Do I have a seconder, Deputy Mayor? Is there any discussion on the motion? Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Sean. Next item is Weathertide Homes, item 15 on page 105. Welcome, Phil. And Corey, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm happy to take the report as read. Is there any particular comments that you want to make on the report?
There's just a couple of things, I guess, just to quickly update you, would be that we're continuing to see a reduction in the number of new claims. That's something that we reported last time before the committee. We've got one new claim that was previously found ineligible but has come back into the circle because of a legislative change, and that's in the report. And we think our risk assessment is pretty accurate as it was, with fairly low risk given the number of claims we've got.
Okay.
Happy to take any questions.
I've got a question just around that Supreme Court decision on paragraph 19.
Yeah.
Is there a risk for council that if a building owner took a number of years to get the code of compliance issued, that the start date effectively gets extended well beyond the, if you like, the time that the building was completed?
The start.
Is there a risk for us there that if, if somebody took 3 or 4 years to finally get the code of compliance issued, that our risk, our 10-year, is it 10-year risk, starts from that date rather than from the date when the building may have been largely constructed 3 or 4 years earlier?
It's fundamentally correct. The Supreme Court decision just ratifies what we already knew, that the date for the 10-year liability period starts when we issue the CCC, Code Compliance Certificate.
Okay.
So whatever the date of the Code Compliance Certificate, our liability starts from then for 10 years.
For 10 years, yeah. So the owner could have a much longer period if they were late in getting their Code of Compliance?
The longer we've delayed in issuing a Code Compliance, the further it pushes that time frame out.
Yeah. But what about the owner? Can they delay the issue of the Code of Compliance by not finishing the building?
Well, they have. So what we're talking about is cases that have already been done. So, I mean, the action around the Code Compliance Certificate issue or otherwise has already happened.
Okay. So there's not likely to be any ongoing ones then?
No, because Code Compliance Certificate is more important these days and gets issued generally on every building.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions of Phil or Corey? All right, I'm happy to move that the report be received. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Young. Any discussion? Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we have the late item, which is the late item that was distributed earlier today. Just by way of background, we did provide input to and some comments at the elected members briefing on Tuesday, and so this has given Mark and Andrew an opportunity to write up those comments into the submission. So the floor is yours, Mark, to report to us on that. Sorry.
I'm Paul Ryan.
Oh, Paul, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Paul.
Okay. The government has asked for feedback on various proposals that are set out in this consultation document. Some of the proposals have potential to affect council's interests as a municipal water supplier and as a manager of stormwater and wastewater, and so it makes sense for council to take the opportunity to respond to the document and try and influence the government in a way which furthers the council's interests. So we've drafted a submission using the guidance we got at the briefing on Tuesday, and we've addressed a number of key issues that are of interest to council. The first one relates to significant infrastructure and and water quality. We are recommending that the consultation document posed a question about the criteria that should be used to determine whether a particular infrastructure should be listed in Appendix 3 of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, and we have set out in the submission some high-level criteria that should be considered. The second issue is an item 4 of the submission about economic use of water. At the briefing on Tuesday, councillors wanted a clear statement that the council supports the government's position set out in the consultation document that no one owns fresh water, so we've begun that part of the submission with that statement at 4.1. The proposal is that the government will develop some good management practice standards and some technical efficiency standards. So we're indicating at 4.6 in the submission that council wishes to be consulted about those standards. The next item 5 was about transferring consents to more efficient higher valued users, and in response to the direction from councillors on Tuesday, we've indicated that the council supports in principle making it easier for consents to be transferred because this would enable better use to be made of the limited available water resource. So that's specified at 5.2. Councillors had some concerns about that, which we've reflected at 5.4 in the submission. Any arrangements for transfer of consent should be consistent with the government's position that no one owns fresh water. Secondly, that sale and purchase of consents to take and use or discharge to water should not be allowed. And thirdly, that the exercise of any transferred consent should be consistent with the conditions of the original consent or made subject to alternative conditions appropriate to the activity to which the consent is transferred. So I've indicated at 5.5 that council supports the elements of the proposal. That's standardising consent conditions to better enable transfer, making information about consents available to the public, which would help identify where there might be an opportunity to transfer consent. Model provisions specifying where and in what circumstances transfers are permitted. And item 4 there under 5.5, enabling water user groups and nutrient groups to provide for low-cost transfers. The next item was about addressing over-allocation and overuse at least cost. And as discussed at the briefing, we've put in there at 6.2 that council considers it would be helpful if the government established a priority order for water takes and or use and for discharges to water. The final subject was on iwi rights and interests in fresh water, and councillors gave directions at the briefing about what they wanted to see put in there. I haven't noted in particular at 7.2 that council notes the statement in the consultation document that the Waitangi Tribunal has accepted that the Treaty of Waitangi changed Māori rights by giving the Crown governance powers, which includes the right to manage fresh water in the best interests of all. At 7.3 in the submission, we set out that council already operates under the arrangements established by the Waikato River Settlement Act, and councillors also wanted mention of the positive relationship we have with the Waikato Raupatu Lands Trust and that is made in item 7.5. And the submission just seeks a similar, the consultation document says that the proposed amendments to the Resource Management Act won't upset the treaty settlements, and at 7.7 the submission seeks a similar assurance with respect to any amendment to the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management.
Thanks, Paul.
So that's an outline.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Thank you for that summary of the discussion that we had on Tuesday. Question from Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Paul. I want to ask a question about the issue of the economic use of fresh water and owning that. Looking at the statement in 4.1, no one owns fresh water. How does that play out against the current debate over whether local authorities should be able to allow economic use by private commercial organisations of freshwater resources? And I mean, I'm not sure what it's actually saying, what the government's saying there, and what we're meaning by that statement. Are we supporting? At the moment, that's being used to justify, that statement by the government is being used to justify publicly the sale of, I guess, consents to private organisations to exploit the water resources, particularly exporting them overseas. So I'm trying to see whether that's still what it means and whether we're saying we support that.
I think this is particularly relevant in relation to iwi matters. The government has been very clear in the document and at a presentation given by the Minister for the Environment when he was in the city recently, was that no one owns fresh water. So,
no, well, it's actually nothing to do with the iwi issue that I'm raising. It, I'm aware of what you're talking about. I'm looking at issues where places like Ashburton District Council and South Waikato District Council on selling or selling, I'm not sure which it is, the rights to extract fresh water from aquifers in those areas, selling them millions of litres at 1/1,000,000 of a cent sort of price per litre to private commercial organisations. So that's the big debate going on in New Zealand at the moment, and the government, when asked whether that's a good idea, is saying no one owns fresh water. So they can, and that's sort of as a justification for councils being allowed to approve that happening and to get some small income from it. Not that we would be selling Waikato River water, unless you like the colour green, but...
Well, I think councils at the briefing on Tuesday gave a clear direction that they wanted...
Paul, I'm not interested in councils at the briefing on Tuesday. That's an informal meeting. This is the formal meeting. I'm asking you a question about the situation, what this means.
Well,
perhaps if I offer an explanation, and I guess we can. The purpose of this discussion is to reflect the council's views, and we can change this. Where I think the debate's heading strategically into the future is the difference between the cost to treat and distribute water, which is the cost HCC currently faces in terms of the water business, versus the value of water. So that's quite a different conversation. I think that's where this is potentially heading longer term through government process. At the moment, we've put forward a view here that says that we support the notion that no one owns fresh water, but we can change that if that's the view around this table.
Well, yeah, where I'm coming from is that there's large public disquiet. You may have seen earlier this week a large demonstration, proportionally extremely large, in the town Ashburton, where the council there had sold the rights to some land, which included the right to extract fresh water from the aquifer, and the cost was only effectively the cost of a consent, a few grand, so it made a infinitesimal cost per litre of water to the owner of that piece of land or the leaseholder.
I think, Councillor, if I may, I think the answer is this is an emerging area of debate for the country, because this is about, as the team have said, this is about the current use and allocation and costing of the three waters versus the emerging debate around how you get consent for use of water, which then leads to a profit down the track.
Well, I think,
clarity is not there.
I agree, but council...
hang on a second. I haven't finished yet, you wish.
Yeah, but you've got a good point.
Because I appreciate that this may have been set up for a different reason, but the government is pretty clear when you listen to their spokespeople talk about it in the media at the moment, is saying, yes, that's the rule at the moment, but it's under discussion. So if that issue is under discussion, then surely I want to make sure that our input is germane to that discussion. And if the majority don't think like me, that's fine, but we need to be talking about some of those issues that are coming up right now, not about maybe the original intention of this.
I think Councillor McPherson, you raise a valid point there, and on Tuesday we did discuss exactly this issue around the Ashburton matter. This is a discussion document, I suppose, so it's not going to end up being in legislation at this stage, but I think the general feeling around the table at that elected member briefing was that we generally supported that comment that was in the paper that no one owns fresh water.
And my problem with that is if that's the implication that can be taken out of that, and I want to check whether it is being taken out, is that therefore the current practice, which has got a lot of the communities around the country quite upset, and there's 70 odd similar operations, we're told, around the country. I don't know whether there's any in Hamilton.
We know there's one in Pateru.
Yes, absolutely. That was the first one that came to attention. Is that, is it being the fact that no one owns water, therefore leading to an exploitation of that resource for commercial gain, and not necessarily for New Zealand commercial or local commercial gain? And that then maybe the communities own the water.
Well, is it? I mean, would it be?
We should add something in about this.
Would it be? Yeah, so I was going to say, should we add something in about this that we believe that no one owns the fresh water, but at the same time we believe that commercial exploitation of water for zero value or something along those lines is not something that we support.
Or should come at an appropriate cost to the benefit derived by the commercial entity.
And I think that because we do commoditise water now for irrigation purposes or for even behaviour modification in terms of water conservation. So there is
and we do charge for water, don't we?
We do charge for water for some commercial uses here in Hamilton. I think the issue we're describing is how you then, exactly as you've said, begin to make profits beyond what would be reasonably expected by New Zealanders for the use of that water for New Zealand outcomes, i.e. irrigation, drinking water and the like. And this has now been about water exported beyond. And
maybe how you set the priorities nationally, because the point being made in mid-Canterbury at the moment is that they have a water shortage, but they're still in one part, surrounding.
One paddock has got heaps of water.
So who sets that priority? Does the council of one area draw down the aquifer so the farmers around it can't get access?
Well, are you happy that we add to that?
I'm not even trying to say what the answer is, that we should be looking at that question.
Because this is a discussion paper, so I guess they're looking for feedback, and it may well end up in most other submissions that they get.
I think it's a wise opportunity to at least raise that we've identified the issue, as is in Ashburton. We don't have a solution, but it should be something that should be considered.
Yeah.
Are you happy to let Paul add?
Oh, yeah, I'm not worried about the wording.
Yep. So are you able to do that for tomorrow? I understand the submission's due in tomorrow.
That's correct, yeah.
So we can reflect something, and I just want to offer a note of caution. So at the moment, if the cost of water is simply just the treatment and distribution costs, and I absolutely accept Councillor McPherson's point, but the same would apply to the city then, because at the moment the cost to the city and cost to industry and cost to ratepayers is just the straight treatment and distribution costs. So if we anchored a notion that then you pay for the benefit you receive from water, there, in terms of everyone being treated the same throughout the country, there would be a cost.
Well, yes, but it could be that if the community owns it and the community uses it, then it's a net low cost. If someone outside, whatever you define the community as, uses it, then the net cost is higher.
So we'll take
the government could develop that into legislation, which ultimately is probably what will come out of this discussion paper.
So we'll take the feedback. We'll try and wrap some words around this to reflect the point that Councillor McPherson's raised.
Okay.
Can I give my feedback on this? Is that all right? I've got some feedback.
Please do.
So on page 8, 5, I'm not sure that we, 5.2, we in principle support. I thought we supported the concept of transferring consent.
So where are you?
5.2. So I'm not sure if that actually reflects what we said at all. And 5.3, I don't think that actually reflects what we said either. It was used as an example to demonstrate why there would be a value in having the ability to transfer consents if you had space available in your consent. But I'm not sure that's what we said at all. We said that we thought it was a good idea to do that, but that it would need to have a series of criteria around how we do that. So I don't agree that 5.3 is correct. 5.4, you've started listing those, but one of the criteria that we said was that the regulatory authority who allocates the consent, in these cases in New Zealand it's the Regional Council, they would be the, we suggested that would be the mechanism by which you would do it rather than a contract between parties, because the regulator, regulatory authority, would then be the overseer. So, I've got space in my consent, I have that available for someone else to use for a specified time, but it would be the Regional Council who granted the consent in the first place that would manage that, because that then avoided that issue that we were concerned about, which was like a tradable situation. Councillor King used the example of, the ETS scheme, and it was a valid point. And I think the majority of councillors agreed on the idea of transferring consents with a strict criteria around it. So I don't think that accurately reflects what we said. And I think in 6, I guess it's a style, but I actually thought what we said was that our position on that question was that there should be a priority, not to be helpful, there should be one, and that priority should record that the first priority was to humans for their use and consumption, because it's an essential part of life. So it's not, we didn't say it would be helpful, we said it should be prioritised. So it just sort of waters it, no pun intended, but it waters it down when you just don't say it how it is. And in relation to the discussion that's just been had, the paper is about economic use of fresh water, and I'm not sure that the discussion paper contemplated what the issue is that we have been talking about. In fact, it didn't contemplate that. But now it's become topical. So I think our submission should be recording that the discussion paper should be widened to include that topic. And that topic for me, I think, is about the distinction between having access or allocation to water as a commercial product in itself, i.e. I've got a business and I'm commercialising the water by putting it in the bottles and selling it, as distinct from a consent for water to enable economic activity, i.e. a freezing works, which needs a lot of water to generate their activity. And that is not in the discussion paper. and I think we should put something in about that. But it is trying to distinguish between legitimate economic activity that needs water and generating a commercial return out of water in itself. And I think we should put something in there, but the discussion paper doesn't cover that, and so we need to encourage them to widen the debate about that. And I suspect that that will be tricky. So that's my feedback. Overall, I personally think submissions should be a lot more punchy, so that you can pick them up and understand exactly what our position is. I sort of sometimes feel our submissions are just lost in the detail. But anyway.
All right,
That's my
thank
feedback.
You. Any further discussion, questions?
Yeah.
Councillor King.
I'm of the opposite opinion. I mean, this to me is clearly that water isn't sold, and we distribute it at the cost of distribution and recover that money. I don't see the difference between putting water in a bottle and selling it for $3 a litre, or washing out a cow at the freezing works, a carcass, or watering your garden at home to grow a lettuce. How you could ever work out and put a structure around how you were using it, how much profit you were making out of it, so how much you'd have to pay. And so around that subject, I find it, I mean, dare I say it, it's a little bit like mining, and pulling water out of the ground and using it for, you know, for selling it or whatever. And I just find it difficult to, if it's not for sale, and the underpinning principle of the whole document is that water's not for sale, how do you then charge people who do use it to generate wealth? And I just think it's really dangerous going in that direction in the first place. And obviously, as you know from the discussion we had at the briefing the other day, I'm really opposed to trading, and I almost feel like 5 is almost a contradiction in itself, in that it says we support transfers of, you know, of consents. So, in other words, I think running out of water to put onto the new road and then saying, well, there's an oversupply in another part of the country, and trading one with the other is just getting into carbon credit trading system where somebody buys a forest in another part of the world to cover for an airport in somewhere else and calling the airport a zero emissions airport. I mean, it's just, to me, that's just rubbish, just doesn't even make sense. And to me, to be able to get into trading consents between different parts of the country is just ludicrous, and it's turning this into something I don't think it was ever intended to be. And so why I say that it's what 5 is contradicting itself is that we're saying we want to trade, we want to get into a position of being able to trade, and then we come down to 5.41, and then we're talking about you know, that there won't be sale and purchase around consents. It's just to me, it's a contradiction in itself, that the way that's been written up. So I'm really concerned that this is going out and we're not going to see the final copy. We're making changes here now the night before, and what is actually going to go in it. So close to the 12th hour. And I aren't happy with a couple of the areas, as I've just spoken about.
Could I just respond on one matter? There's not a suggestion, I don't think, in the submission that we are supporting or advocating the trading of consents. I think it's quite the contrary. But we are supporting the concept of making it easy to transfer the consent. And we're being very clear that we don't think that consent should be bought and sold. So it would be up to the regulator to determine whether a consent could be transferred either temporarily or on a permanent basis, and what conditions would go around the transfer. And the document is suggesting that they would set out under what circumstances transfers are permitted.
Chair, I'm happy to move that, just remind me, what is the process that we signed off on the council in terms of making submissions? Sure. If we made changes here, what's the process? Okay, so my suggestion, given the topic, is that you seek an extension. I'm happy to move a resolution that says that. And that would be that this report is received, that the feedback, further feedback from councillors is noted, and that a further draft will be circulated early next week for approval by councillors. Now, that will have to be, we've got a council meeting next week, so it could come back and be signed off at the council meeting next week, and that staff are to seek an extension for 1 week. And I'm reasonably confident that extension would be accepted, but if it's not, then you need, my suggestion would be, you'd have to check with the Chief Executive, is that you would submit what you've got on the proviso that it has not been approved by the council and that amendments may be made. So,
yep.
Okay, so report be received, that staff note the feedback, further feedback and comments from councillors, that a final draft is circulated early next week, and that will be a late agenda item for the council meeting next week for approval, and that staff are to seek an extension of 1 week from MFE to file the submission. And in the event that that extension is not approved, that staff are permitted to file the draft on the proviso that it may be amended by councillors at the council meeting next week. Did you get all that? Perfect.
Right, so Her Worship's moved that.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Any discussion? Right, those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Andrew. We now move into a resolution to exclude the public, and I will so move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tooman.